indictment of former FBI Director James Comey is the campaign of retribution Donald Trump long promised, now running at full throttle. That and so much more this week on the Dispatch podcast with my friend Jonathan Martin, politics bureau chief and senior columnist at Politico, also the author with Alex Burns of This Will Not Pass, one of the best books written about this fraught moment in American political history. Jonathan, welcome to the Dispatch podcast.
Thank you, Steve.
Are we in the middle of Donald Trump's long-promised campaign of retribution? Is this what, should we have known that this is what this was going to look like when he was campaigning a year ago today?
He didn't hide the ball in the campaign. He sure doesn't hide the ball now. Nobody should be surprised. He's never feigned about doing anything else. That's one thing we shouldn't be as surprised. I do think it's alarming. You know, he openly and brazenly told his attorney general that it's time to get moving. Mission accomplished. Dumped the U.S. attorney for the Eastern District, rushed through an appointment of somebody who they knew would bring charges, and do so, I think this is important, do so in a matter of days, really hours, before the statute of limitations expired. And now we'll see if a judge and or jury, actually takes this seriously. But the intent is deadly serious, and anybody's eyes weren't open. They should be open now.
For me, at least, the alarming thing, to use your word, this was predictable. He ran on it. He said he was specific about who he was going to go after. James Comey was at or near the top of the list from the beginning. So nobody should be surprised about that. But I think the fact that he's done it out in the open, and not just in the open, but in sort of a chest beating, defy me if you dare kind of way, where I think being so public and so brazen about what he's doing, I am punishing my enemies right now, is the thing that's as alarming as anything else about this whole episode.
Right. And, Lisa Cook is a member of the Federal Reserve Board who he wants to get rid of. So he's found a pretext to try to get rid of her. That's going to the Supreme Court. Okay, we got to find some charges on Comey. They're flimsy, but okay, let's go with it. This is not the end. This is the beginning, Steve. And he's gonna have his people find, ways to go after his opponents and those who he believes are not part of his team. He does not want any check and balance. He wants unfettered authority over the whole of the federal government, and if we're being totally honest, the whole of civil society. We know that. He doesn't deny it. And the question, as ever with all things Trump, is anybody going to say anything about it that is part of his movement and is in his party? Or are they okay with this? Are Mike Johnson and John Thune, who lead what is ostensibly a co-equal branch of government, okay with the president undermining the Fed's independence? Are they okay with, rushing through flimsy charges against the former head of the FBI because Trump doesn't like him? We know Trump's good with that. Trump doesn't hide the ball. But again, what's the reaction of everybody else? And so far, it's silence.
And I want to get back to both John Thune and Mike Johnson, because I think you're right. Those are sort of the places to look. But it's also the White House staff and the cabinet secretaries, this time in Trump's second term, are very different. I think see themselves very differently than the people who served Trump in the first term. In particular, I would point to White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles. I think each of Trump's first term chiefs of staff saw themselves in one way or another as being in a position to redirect his energies or to serve as those guardrails. I mean, certainly John Kelly saw that as probably his primary role.
Mattis, certainly.
Mick Mulvaney, Mattis, I think even Reince Priebus. Susie Wiles, I was talking to somebody very close to Trump not long ago, who said Susie Wiles came in and just saw herself performing a different role. She sees herself as just going along with what Trump wants to do, not trying to redirect him, not trying to challenge him, but understanding that if she gets in his way or if she ever becomes sort of an obstacle to Donald Trump getting to do what he wants to do, she won't be long for the White House. Is that sort of a proper understanding of her role and what's happening at the White House?
Yeah, she doesn't see her role as telling Trump no. And I think
right
before her, certainly in the previous I think in the previous iterations of his campaigns, inevitably people around him saw themselves as something of a check on him. Not every day, but certainly that was part of the role. It was understood that you were going to have to say this is too much, or at least slow walk stuff in hopes that he would change his mind or forget about it. I just don't see her doing that. And, beyond her, he has installed a cabinet and a senior White House staff that is pliant, that sees themselves as there entirely to carry out his orders or come up with orders themselves, a minimum challenge the norms of American government and society. So, yeah, I just, there's not that person this time telling him no. There's not, Gary Cohn taking the paper literally off the Oval Office desk. I think that's why we have pure unfiltered Trump this time.
Right. Let's turn to Congress. I mean, we do occasionally see, fleeting as they are, you have moments of defiance. It's rare that you have a Republican senator or a Republican member of the House sort of step up to Trump, challenge him by name, challenge him directly, question his authority to do X, Y, or Z. But you do sometimes have Republican members of Congress raising concerns in one way or the other. You saw this at the hearing with Robert F. Kennedy when Bill Cassidy said he was concerned. John Barrasso, senator from Wyoming, has become close to Trump, very supportive of the Trump administration, said he was concerned. Your column earlier this week highlights Ted Cruz, who is not normally somebody who steps up to challenge the president of the United States since what you called their memorable unpleasantness of 2016 between Trump and Cruz. And yet this week, in the aftermath of the controversy with FCC Chairman Brendan Carr, in effect threatening ABC, threatening Disney for comments that Jimmy Kimmel had made, threatening to potentially revoke their licenses, other forms of retribution, Ted Cruz spoke up and said, hey, this is sort of mafioso stuff. This is kind of crazy. I'll read from your piece. He said, by likening the intimidation tactics of President Donald Trump's FCC to the mafia, in the case of the government versus Jimmy Kimmel, Cruz imparted a valuable lesson his colleagues and everyone else in public life should mind. This is still America, and you can speak up about your principles. It seems to me that the Brendan Carr threats were so egregious, so over the top. It wasn't necessarily surprising that somebody like a Ted Cruz or a Rand Paul or others would at least register their disagreement. Is there anything more to it? Is that all they're doing, or are we seeing between the RFK spokes, people speaking out, between Ted Cruz and Rand Paul here? Can we imagine any time that Republicans in the Senate might sort of grow a spine and speak out? Well,
first of all, it's such remedial math that in the first place, I even have to write the fact that this is still America. You can speak up for your principles. Talk about the soft bigotry of low expectations, to borrow a phrase from the 43rd president of the United States. I wrote it, but it's still sad to hear it said out loud. But it does tell you kind of where we are in this country. I don't expect much more. Look, if Carr was to suddenly start trying to yank licenses of networks, yeah, there'd be more of an outcry. But now that Kimmel's been brought back on the air, Sinclair is going to start airing him again. I think this is a minor victory and a minor display of independence. But no, I don't think we're going to see an outbreak of profiles and courage needing a second volume, Steve, here in the coming months. I think Cruz has picked two spots now, one on freedom of speech, and then earlier this spring on tariffs, in which I think Cruz is making a long-term bet that at some point, maybe not 28, but maybe in 32, that the Republican Party is going to want some version of traditional conservatism again. And they're not going to throw Donald Trump away into the dustbin of history. But I think Cruz is betting that there's something of a course correction, that the party does come back to a more traditional conservatism. I'm not totally sold on that, but clearly he's looking for a lane. He's looking to sort of carve out something for himself. And I think that's why he picked those two issues.
I mean, it'd be interesting if he has that foresight and if he's making that bet. He does make his case in, largely in political terms, right? I mean, one of the things he said was, hey, conservatives have to be careful about sort of countenancing this kind of behavior because it's going to come back to get us one day.
Yes.
Which, look, I'd rather have him make that argument than not make any argument, but sort of the practical political argument.
Well, he's trying to convince conservatives as to why they should just toe the Trump line. And it's a pretty compelling argument. It also happens to echo the case that the Wall Street Journal editorial page has been making on a variety of issues for the last 8 months, Steve, as you know, which is, if you think Trump doing this is fine and dandy, well, you wouldn't like it if the other side is doing it when they're in power next. So I think it's a pretty good argument, but it's hard to tell partisans that they should be worried about the other side doing the same thing. It feels so distant. And again, the impulse is to kind of defend your own side.
Well, and the MAGA, I mean, look, the MAGA counter argument to that is, what do you mean they will do this in the future?
They already are. Yeah.
They've done this in the past. They've been doing this forever. And this is the way that, the left governs, by using mafioso tactics. And unfortunately, I will say, in some instances, they're not wrong. I mean, I thought the case that was brought against Ted Cruz that was brought against Donald Trump in New York was an abomination. It was a total stretch. She had, in effect, announced that she was going to go after the president in a way that we don't like in this country, or we've rejected in this country for a while, at least in my Pollyannish view. And they point to things like that, and I think make a valid point. Do they have an argument?
Look, I think the nature of some of the legal cases brought against Trump were, I don't think, the strongest, shall we say? And I think, part and parcel of partisan politics. Like with everything Trump says and does, that's just a pretext for him, right? And it just makes it go down easier for his side, right? To say, well, look, Tish James did the same thing to him. Well, not exactly, but obviously, to your point, it does give his partisans the opportunity to say that their hands aren't clean either. It kind of reminds me of Trump obviously has decided that he wants to make a bunch of red states redraw their maps mid-decade so that he can keep the House majority. And of course, the rationalization on the Republicans who spend half their lives trying to rationalize stuff Trump does by finding some case where the other side did it too to make it go down easier is, well, Democrats gerrymandered too. Just look at Illinois. And absolutely, both parties have been gerrymandering forever. This is not a new strategy in American politics. The difference is that the two parties typically gerrymander their states when you have a census, and you have the year after the census is done when you draw new maps for the next decade, not in the middle of the decade when your sitting president decides he wants to keep the House through any means necessary and demands that various red states go back to the drawing board and blow up their maps so that he can keep the House. It ain't the same, right? But again, the point is not to find an equivalence. The point is just to find some way to muddy the waters, right? Here we are.
Right. Well, thinking about 2026 specifically, the president and his team have raised lots of questions about ballot security, vote integrity, whether the 2026 elections can go off well. The president has talked down, cast doubts about mail-in ballots, says they're illegitimate, wants to go back to all paper ballots. One doesn't have to be paranoid to be concerned about what that might mean in the aftermath of a 2026 presidential election, that he loses the House, that Republicans lose the House. How concerned are you about that? And what's the best way to report that? We were talking about this on our staff the other day. It's a hard thing to sort of get in front of because it is, by definition, so speculative.
I couldn't agree more, but it's something I've been thinking about a lot the last couple of weeks, in part because this sudden grasp for more House seats via mid-decade reapportionment, which, by the way, just doesn't happen. You don't have a dozen states suddenly redrawing their House maps in the middle of the decade. This is a moment that's unique to Trump. And yeah, by the way, the Democrats like Gavin Newsom, J.B. Pritzker, and Wes Moore, of course, are going to try and do it for their maps too, because we're now in the arms race. Steve, I think that's just the beginning. I mean, I'm with you. I worry about how far Trump will go going into the election, during the election, and after the election next year to ensure that he keeps the House. He views the prospect of a third impeachment as this stain, as this black mark that would be totally humiliating, in some ways even more than his criminal indictments. And so I think he's going to go a long way to try to keep the House. And I just think we have to be eyes wide open about this. He is who he is. We shouldn't be surprised. And the question is, how do you report it? Because, I mean, I think there are a few things he could do. But yeah, I mean, it's sort of hard to say he's going to do it until you have some sense that he actually is going to try. But I think it's safe to say that we're only at the beginning of this, you know?
I make that argument to my Republican friends and say, hey, I'm legitimately concerned that he and his team could mess with the vote count, mess with the vote totals, could declare certain elections in certain places that didn't go his way illegitimate. And, you know, my concerns are met, I would say, with great skepticism. And, you know, there's sort of this attempt to poo-poo, oh, you know, you're crazy. He's not going to do that. Of course he's not going to do that. But now, when you make an argument like that or you express concerns like that, it's not hypothetical. I mean, that is what he did in 2020. I mean, we have the recording of his call to Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger where he
more votes.
Says, go find me 11,000 plus votes. This isn't theoretical. This is what he does. He declared that the 2020 election was stolen from him. There's no evidence that it was stolen. There's very little evidence that there was widespread fraud. And yet you have 50+% of the Republican Party that believes what the president says. How do you contend with that?
Well, he did it in the 2016. See, the 2016 Iowa caucuses, for crying out loud.
That's right. That's right.
Any election that does not go the way he prefers, he finds a way to delegitimize it. And clearly, he's now willing to use the arm of federal law enforcement against his rivals. So why wouldn't he do the same in a political context? I mean, I just think we have to be prepared for, extra constitutional behavior from him, right? And again, it comes down to, are folks going to say no? Look, obviously his staff's not going to say no. We just went through that. His cabinet's not going to say no. Okay. All right. So who else we got? We got judges. We got members of Congress. We got two co-equal branches. All right. What are they going to do? Are they going to say anything?
I mean, I think it's a big question. What's the red line? I mean, I would think that
what's the red line?
Something like this indictment of James Comey, maybe not even because of the indictment itself. I mean, the indictment itself we'll be able to take a look when the federal government reveals more. There's been, I think, widespread and credible reporting that the prosecutors had advised against bringing this indictment. That was one of the reasons that Eric Seibert left as the U.S. Attorney for Eastern District of Virginia. We'll see. We'll learn more when the government makes its case. But what's troubling about this as much as anything, and you made this point earlier, is not so much the indictment itself, but all of the things that led up to the indictment. All of the work that the president did, the directives that he gave, again, in public to his people to get to this outcome, all before the statute of limitations runs out on this next Tuesday. We're recording this Friday, next Tuesday.
Joe Scarborough, Scarborough said something that was very smart on Morning Joe the other day. He said, this is not Watergate where you have to go meet Deep Throat in the garage in Roslyn to get the goods. All you got to do is check your iPhone and see what Trump is saying out loud. And by the way, I think that because he does it in public and because there's so much, Steve, every day, that in some ways it kind of it blunts the impact of this, right? He says, Pam, talking about his AG, using her first name, this is embarrassing. We got to, we got to get at these folks. It's right out in the open. And so that's exactly what happened. Yeah, I think you make an important point about the the context of this, and it happened so fast, it's so overwhelming that we haven't totally digested it yet. But it's important for your listeners to grasp this. The Eastern District of Virginia, very prominent jurisdiction, kind of similar to the Southern District of New York. You have really impressive prosecutors there, always have had them over the years because the proximity to Washington, D.C. It's in Alexandria, Virginia. And you have somebody, so respected attorney, approved by both Democratic senators in Virginia. And of course, he's not going to bring flimsy charges against the former head of the FBI. And so they moved him out, and they had no reason to move him out. Trump came up with the idea,
and he was a Trump appointee.
Correct.
Should be pointed out.
I think that Trump said because Kane and Warner, the two senators from Virginia, liked him, that he shouldn't be there. No, he got moved out because he would bring charges against Comey. So they bring in somebody who will do it. No prosecutorial experience before, who was a member of Trump's legal team, who hasn't even found the washroom in the office yet, and she's bringing charges against Comey hours later. And again, doing so because they're up against the wall on the statute of limitations running out. And then, Steve, the charges are so flimsy that they can only bring 2 of the 3 counts because the third count is so laughable that a grand jury won't even approve it. I mean, grand jury, as the saying goes, will hand down a ham sandwich, right? And they couldn't even get all 3. So it's just, if it wasn't so serious, it'd be preposterous.
I mean, Lindsay Halligan, who Trump has tapped to lead the Eastern District of Virginia, was one of Trump's defense attorneys, has experience as an insurance litigator, has 0 prosecutorial experience because the qualification for the job was to go after these people that Donald Trump has named, which is, again, if this were sort of on its own, had happened under a different administration, and it had happened in secret and we found out about this, I mean, I think there would be discussions of impeachment. Like, that's how serious this would be. But because he does it out in the open, and because he's sort of unapologetic about it, it tends not to have. And
because, there's no pretense that the Department of Justice is independent any longer or free from presidential intervention, right? It's like, we know that he's running it himself. That's why he appointed who
he says it. Yes.
And he says it.
He says
right?
it.
I know. Now, Steve, you mentioned red lines, and he has said repeatedly he wants to go after Tish James, who's the Attorney General of New York. Who's a sitting elected official in New York State, a law enforcement official in New York State. And Adam Schiff was a duly elected senator from California. Now, unlike Comey, both of them are currently in office. That, to me, if he does find charges on either or both of them, then you're dealing with next level stuff. Because, okay, you're talking about somebody who's an elected official, and you're going to try and bring charges against them. What are the nature of the charges? How does that work? Is there pressure on the prosecutor's office in New York with James? What does that look like? With Schiff, how does that work with his Senate seat? I mean, it's a whole different kettle of fish,
Well, and I mean, look, we've seen, in the firing of Lisa Cook, who you mentioned earlier, who's the Fed governor, there were claims that she had committed mortgage fraud. Those claims didn't really withstand scrutiny, but that was the cause given to remove her. There's obvious double standard here. There are Trump administration officials, senior Trump administration officials, prominent Republicans, including Ken Paxton in Texas, who's running for Senate, who have done the same. The fact pattern is similar to what the Trump administration had laid out against Lisa Cook. They don't care. And I think the thing that strikes me about this is there's no pretense at consistency.
No, not at all. Of course not. And nobody's going to say otherwise, right? And again, Trump says it out loud. He says he wants full control of the Fed. He wants to control the Fed. And she's, I think, in the way of that. So we know who he is. We know why he's doing it. And the question is there anybody who's ever going to stop him? Period.
So let me ask you that question directly. John Thune was somebody who had been skeptical of Trump for a long time, since Trump arrived on the scene, had shown a willingness to kind of stand up and buck President Trump on issues important to his constituents in South Dakota, issues of principle. I would say he hasn't done that very often here. He hasn't. There have been moments, the recess appointment thing before he was elected majority leader. He stood up. There have been moments, but we haven't really seen John Thune or anybody else in leadership in the House and Senate say, hey, this crosses the red line. Right. And this is a moment for me to speak out. Do you anticipate that we will see that? And who would be the person to do that? What would be the precipitating event?
I think it's going to take a lot more. I just think that the partisan tides are so strong. It's a magnetic pull toward Trump and Trumpism. And I think it's going to have to go a lot further. But obviously, I mean, some of this stuff is embarrassing because it's hard to justify for all the obvious reasons. Trump does not need Congress for that much. And so it's not even like, they have leverage over his agenda at this point, right? They're speeding up the confirmation of his nominees. They passed the one big ticket bill he wanted to get done. Otherwise, Steve, Trump wants to sign executive orders all day. He doesn't even want to work with Congress. So, and furthermore, his OMB director is doing these rescissions, which are, undermining one of Congress's constitutional prerogatives, which is the power of the purse. They control spending in this country. That's being undermined. And you don't see much pushback at all. And I just don't anticipate, barring some, profound change, that happening. It's striking.
And I think they have cover because he ran on retribution. I mean, that's their defense on everything. Well, yes, he may be crossing the line, but he said he was going to do it. Yeah. The donors like it. The activist base likes it.
Trump is way too popular with their voters, is the bottom line. Okay. And
with their voters.
And right. Overall, he's not popular. He's in the low 40s, but he's still hanging in there. Look, if we go into a recession and Trump's numbers fall into the 30s, then you start hearing the L word, which is lame duck, which you haven't heard yet really at all. And that will change if Trump does fall into the 30s. I just don't think, barring that, you're going to see much in the way of a big shift. Look, if Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins, Tom Tillis, who's not running for re-election, throw in Bill Cassidy, who's going to have a tough primary. Steve, if they wanted to band together, oh my gosh, they could have a voice. I just don't see it happening. They're embarrassed by Kennedy. They used the hearing with Kennedy to criticize him, but there's nobody calling for him to resign, right?
Even in light of the Tylenol announcement, which I think many of the Republican senators were embarrassed about.
I mean, if those senators went to Trump and said, this is terrible politics, it's breaking through with normal voters, and it's hurting us and it's hurting you, can you please move him out? I don't know if you do it or not, but they don't even try. They don't even try, right? Privately, let alone publicly. What does Tom Tillis have to lose? He's not running for re-election next year. He said he was going to be, a big voice. Okay, you complain about Kennedy at the hearing. What else he got?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the fact that he's popular, very popular with the Republican base. He's not popular much beyond that, either with independents and obviously not with Democrats. I want to turn to the Democrats in a moment, but first I think we need to take a break from all of this serious politics.
Can we please?
And talk about food.
Can we please?
All right, we're going to take a quick break, but we'll be back soon with more from the Dispatch podcast. You are currently coming to us from Memphis, Tennessee.
Yes.
We're recording this 4:30 on Friday afternoon, which means a meal is in your not too distant future. What are you going to eat in this famous eating city, foodie town? And what restaurant are you going to go to? What are you going to order?
I'm sitting at the end of Beale Street. I'm looking at the Mississippi River. Precisely, I'm looking at the bridge that spans Tennessee and Arkansas, and Mud Island is below it. If folks have seen The Firm, the movie based on the John Grisham novel, they know what I'm talking about. I love Memphis. It's got character. It's got soul. It's got heart. It's a great river city. Kind of like my favorite city, New Orleans. In fact, it's the same damn river, it turns out. We are going to go and have the great dry and wet rubs at Rendezvous, one of the great American institutions, perhaps the greatest American rib joint owned by the Burgos family and our friend John Burgos, to be exact. And then we're going to see a great show. Branford Marsalis, speaking of New Orleans, a son of New Orleans, just happens to be playing a show here tonight while we're in town. So we're going to catch him and then head on down to Oxford for the LSU Ole Miss matchup tomorrow between undefeateds. First time since 1959. And folks will recall Billy Keenan's famous Halloween run in which LSU beat undefeated Ole Miss, that the two teams have played each other undefeated, which is incredible actually to think about, that they have.
It's a pitched rivalry even when they're not undefeated.
It's huge. And look, when Ole Miss beats LSU, it's like Christmas in Oxford. I mean, it's like the biggest game of the year for them. They're just, they're over the moon. So we're going to eat ribs tonight. I love Memphis.
What's better? What do you prefer, the dry rub?
I like them both. And there's also this app they serve with like cheese and sausage, which is a really classic Memphis app with some crackers that we like. It's a great spot. Folks that know it, just across from the Peabody in the alley, you go downstairs. I also love, there's a place here in Memphis where I almost always get a sandwich. It's called Payne's on Lamar Avenue, Paynes. They got, I think, the best barbecue sandwich for my money in Memphis, and it's got this mustardy coleslaw. It's a great sandwich. But ribs.
Did we talk about that one time with Howard Ford?
We definitely did.
We might have.
Yes.
I think that's his. That's his.
We definitely have talked to Harold Ford about
Harold Ford.
Payne's.
Did I say Howard Ford? Harold Ford.
Yes,
yeah, Harold.
Definitely have. Payne's is a great spot. I love all kinds of barbecue, but like my approach is when in Rome kind of thing, Steve. So it's like, if I'm in Texas, give me the sausage, give me the brisket and the ribs. I'm in West Tennessee, I'm in Memphis. Like, all right, like I want ribs wet and dry. If I'm in Carolina or out east, give me the hush puppies and the vinegar based barbecue. It just totally depends upon where I am. So I'm happy to be back in Memphis here though now.
So you are you do a ton of traveling.
Yes.
You've done this for a long time.
Yes.
You lead an itinerant lifestyle.
Yes.
And you have the opportunity to eat in some of the best restaurants or most notable restaurants in all the places you visit.
I don't miss many meals.
Neither do I, unfortunately. And we've had many together. What's the best campaign meal or most memorable campaign meal you've had as you've traveled covering politics?
Oh my gosh. I can't answer that question because there have been so many.
Pick 2 or 3.
Well, so many in Iowa over the years.
I think I was with you at one of them.
There's a place called Archie's Wayside, which is out in Lamar's, Iowa, in northwest Iowa. It's a classic Midwestern-style supper club that's got phenomenal steaks and wine. I actually wrote about it for the Times in 2016. Is a special place. Love Archie's. In South Carolina, I eat a lot of barbecue in South Carolina. Rodney Scott's is a fantastic spot. The original one in Hemingway, and obviously he's now opened one downtown Charleston too. But there's a great spot in Charleston also on Upper King Street in an old bank called The Ordinary. The Ordinary is a seafood joint, and they've got these Hawaiian roll oyster sliders. They're just phenomenal. But again, I'm a strict, when in Rome type eater. So it's, I tell my wife Bessie, I just play to strengths, play to strengths. All right. I think Johnny Apple once said, no prawns at this altitude, which is an amazing line. No prawns at this altitude. Johnny's a widow, Bessie's a friend of ours and a great American. And I think about that line a lot. No prawns at this altitude. So, yeah, like if I'm in Memphis, I'm not going to have a halibut tonight. You know what I'm saying? Now, if I'm in San Francisco or Seattle, it's like, yeah, obviously I want to get Dungeness crab. I want salmon. I want halibut. It's just, where are you? Play to strengths.
So you now travel from New Orleans.
Yes.
That's where you call home.
We're part-time New Orleans residents, yes. The world's greatest New Orleans, Louisiana.
You could have one meal in New Orleans and one meal only. Let's say I've got a friend who's coming there on a business trip next weekend, and he can get in anywhere.
Yes.
It's not a matter of being able to get in. What's the restaurant and what's the order?
Is it lunch or dinner?
Dinner.
Okay. It's dinner in New Orleans, and you can only have one?
Only one.
Can you have two dinners at the same night? Like have a 5:30 dinner and 8:30 dinner?
We've been known to do that.
Yes. Okay. If you want to practice total gluttony. So here's my answer. Because there's two different versions of New Orleans. I love both of them equally. I think what I would do is I would go to a place called Mandina's, which is a classic Italian Creole spot in New Orleans, in Mid-City. This is not that widely known, but, you know, a lot of the best neighborhood places in New Orleans are actually Italian Creole places owned by old Sicilian families that serve a mix of both red sauce and staples like shrimp remoulade and gumbo. In fact, our friend Brett Martin is a great food writer, lives in New Orleans, has written about this genre called Italian Creole. So I would get a shrimp remoulade starter, a side of peas, and then I would get a chicken parm or a spaghetti and meatballs at Mandino's, and I'd share it early. Then later, I think I would go to Herb Saint, which is a fantastic restaurant on St. Charles Avenue, and I would get the gumbo to start, some of the fried oyster appetizer as well. And then for dinner, I don't know, if I still had some room, probably get a fish, wherever they had fresh.
And what is it? Airplane chicken is also.
The chicken there is really nice. Yeah. It's a very nice chicken. Yeah. But I just think, you know, you gotta get some fish.
Airplane is great.
Now look, you know, the two grand dames of New Orleans are Commander's Palace and Galatoire's. Commander's Palace is in the Garden District. Galatoire's, as most folks know, is in the French Quarter on Bourbon Street. They're spectacular places, great fish, you know, traditional kind of dressy white tablecloth spots. I love them both. But I just think most of your listeners probably have been to one or both. And if you got to get one meal only in New Orleans, I don't know, mix it up. Do the Italian Creole thing in the neighborhood.
I have never been to the Italian Creole. I'm very interested to try that next time I come down.
We're going to get you set up with a good shrimp remoulade followed by a red sauce, chicken parm, and we'll take good care of you, Steve. Don't worry.
I love it. Well, I've had Herb Saint. That was phenomenal. It was as good as you described it. The Dispatch yesterday hosted Justice Amy Coney Barrett at our inaugural SCOTUS Blog Summit here in Washington, D.C. And
good New Orleans girl.
She is a daughter of New Orleans.
Yes, she is.
And the judge who was asking her questions, interviewed her on stage, did a terrific job, and asked her where she would go for her one meal in New Orleans.
What'd she say?
And she said Galatoire's.
Yeah, I mean, you can't go wrong. It's
classic New Orleans.
It's classic New Orleans. You get a Sazerac or a bourbon. You get what are called souffle potatoes, which I think may actually be illegal in some states. They're so decadent, or at least you have to be above 18. I'm kidding, but the souffle potatoes, they come out, they're piping hot, a little bit of salt, and you dip them in béarnaise, and it's like the Cool Ranch Doritos, man. You know, you can't eat less than 14 of the things. They're so damn good.
Cool Ranch Doritos.
That you cannot stop.
I mean, wow, you're really selling it.
You cannot stop eating the souffle potatoes, all right? Anyways.
Don't you think the chef at Galatoire would be would resent you saying Cool Ranch Doritos?
The addictive nature is similar. There's a similar narcotic put in both products, okay? I can't speak to what Frito-Lay is putting in the cool. Anyways, after you get done with the souffle potatoes, I like to get a gumbo, typically a seafood gumbo, and then whether it pompano or redfish, some kind of fish from the Gulf, and just drown the thing in butter, get the crab on top, and it's just dynamite. It's just dynamite.
You're making me hungry.
I'm going to toss one more place at you, though. It's a very uptown. Yeah. It's an uptown bistro, kind of like Galatoire's, but tucked in a neighborhood deep uptown, as our friend Jeff Duncan, who's the great sports columnist that the Times-Picayune calls it. Deep uptown. It's called Clancy's. Hard to get a table there. They've got these fried oysters with brie cheese as a starter. I mean, talk about decadence. Talk about should be outlawed in some states. It's just unbelievable.
Fried oysters.
Yeah, and they got a massive pork chop there and great fish, too. Clancy's, anyways.
Do you put anything on fried oysters with brie, or do you just eat them that way?
You can toss some Crystal hot sauce on them if you want.
Some hot sauce.
And by the way, pro tip in New Orleans, Tabasco ain't the jam. It's Crystal. All right, real heads know this. You got to go Crystal hot sauce, not Tabasco.
Tabasco's a little bit to the west.
Yeah,
right?
Tabasco, exactly. Avery Island down in Cajun country. Exactly.
Okay, well, I mean, I think we could keep talking about food for the rest of our time together, but we shouldn't. Maybe we should launch a food podcast. I think people might appreciate the distraction from politics.
People have either long turned this off or they're just like hanging on every word.
That's right. Or they're taking notes. They might be taking notes. If they knew how into food you are,
yes,
and your interests parallel mine, they would be taking copious notes or rewinding this, print out the AI transcript of this, and just make a point to go to all these places.
Full props to Steve Hayes here. Point of personal privilege. Betsy and I, for our anniversary a few years ago, did Door County, Wisconsin, which, for those of you who have not experienced the pleasure of the Badger State in full, is that thumb of Wisconsin, which juts into the bay. Door County, one of the great swing counties now, by the way, in American politics. Door County, Wisconsin. We were there in late May. We ate so well, thanks to the advanced work of one Steve Hayes. Fantastic place. Probably had more cheese curds in that 3-day period than I need for the rest of my life. But man, they're good. They're so good.
That's great. You know what's funny is Jonah Goldberg takes pride in disagreeing with me about just about everything. And if I like something a lot, Jonah makes a point to dislike it. So I love Spanish wine. Jonah down talks Spanish wine. I love Wisconsin. Jonah down talks Wisconsin. But he took a trip.
That was the other place, Madrid, Spain, Steve. You set us up in Madrid with a dynamite restaurant. What was that place called?
Angelita.
Yeah. If you're in Madrid.
It's my favorite restaurant in the world. Favorite restaurant in the world.
By the way, the Commanders are playing a game there in November in Madrid. So any football fans going to that game in Madrid, go to Steve's place.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. But Jonah went to Door County at the behest of Fair Jessica, his wife, and they both loved Door County. And for Jonah to admit that in public is big of him. It speaks to how great Door County is.
The supper club culture there is so fun. I love the supper club, man. You get the salad bar, you get the prime rib, the bourbon. It's like a nice dusk sort of cool night. I don't know, man. Something about the supper club vibe is just great.
The best one is Donnie's Glidden Lodge in Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin.
Yes, great. Incredible. Midwest, man.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Should we do politics here at the end?
We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be back shortly. Reluctantly, let's return to politics because I do want to ask you about the Democrats. You've written about the Democrats in 2028. You've written about what's likely to unfold with the primaries, their nominating contests. Yeah. But what strikes me right now in this moment, Kamala Harris has just released her book earlier this week. It sort of landed with a thud. She takes a bunch of shots. She seems to try to settle scores. My impression is she didn't. I have not read the whole book. My impression is she didn't make much of a case. She sort of used the book to explain why she didn't win and maybe couldn't win. I mean, the title of the book is 107 Days, which I think is itself suggestive, but didn't spend as much time making a positive case for her in this current Democratic Party. Question to you is, who are the Democrats today? What do the Democrats stand for? And why, if Donald Trump is so unpopular on the center left, so unpopular with independents, are Democrats having such a tough time making inroads against him?
Well, the first answer to your question is easy. Democrats are not Donald Trump. I mean, the basis, the organizing basis for their party is not being Donald Trump, right? I mean, that was the basis of Biden's candidacy in the primary in general in 2020. And that's what folks voted for. Stop Trump, stop COVID. They didn't vote for the entirety of Biden's agenda, as it turned out, as Abigail Spanberger, then in the House of Representatives, told me the day after the election in 2021, when Democrats lost the governorship in Virginia, nobody elected Joe Biden to be Franklin D. Roosevelt. Okay.
Right.
They elected him to stop COVID and beat Trump. And he did. Biden's challenge was he then didn't fully appreciate that he was leasing the car, not buying it, so to speak. And he was a bridge. And he was mostly there as a vehicle to stop Trump. So Democrats haven't organized for almost 10 years around the idea of not being Donald Trump. And by the way, in special elections and midterms, works pretty well because their electorate tends to come out in those elections. The problem is it's tougher in general elections because Democrats have the problem now that Republicans used to have, which is that they struggle in presidential cycles because the nature of the electorate is a lot bigger. So Democrats don't stand for anything besides being against Trump. Look, they are a cacophonous coalition that includes everybody from folks who would have been moderate, Republicans not long ago to actual socialists. It's everything from the Cheneys to AOC. They're not hanging together on the weekends, right? It's a coalition of convenience. It doesn't stand for anything ideologically except for being against Trump. Now, you could say right now that that's an emergency coalition to stop the incipient autocracy in our country. Some would say, but no, there's no agenda. And Steve, I don't think there's gonna be until there's a nominee in 2028. I don't think it's gonna be Kamala Harris. Our friend Dave Weigel had a really good insight on her book, which is there's nothing in there that is prescriptive about how Democrats can fix their problems. It's all personal about her own experiences and how she was wronged, and trying to explain away her loss. Kamala Harris has nothing to say about what Democrats should stand for on policy or what their vision should be. That's not her thing, right? And she doesn't even bother in the book. So I think it's going to be a rough couple of years until they find a nominee in terms of what they stand for. But until then, Steve, you know what they are. They're not Trump.
I mean, one of the biggest lessons of 2024 has to be that it's not enough to not be Trump because they lost. And Trump made inroads with a number of groups that had previously been more supportive of Democrats. So it would be political malpractice for them to try to sort of run that same race. I wonder this is something I've been sort of obsessed with, and I want to run it by you and get your reaction. One of the reasons Democrats are having so much trouble creating an identity or projecting an identity. If you go to longtime Democrat voters and you say, what does the Democratic Party stand for today? I think they have a hard time articulating that vision or those principles. And one of the reasons I think for that is because Donald Trump himself is relatively non-ideological and has embraced a big role for government in virtually every sphere, whether you're talking about immigration, whether you're talking, the sending the National Guard to quell crime, spending more, fighting against entitlement reform that Republicans used to stand for, protecting, quote unquote, Social Security and Medicare, spending. Democrats had sort of cornered that. That was the main argument that they had made for decades. And he's kind of making it now. He doesn't make it enthusiastically. It's much more sort of grieving politics with giveaways. But they seem unable to come up with a different argument. Is that part of their challenge? And what do you hear from the smartest minds in the Democratic Party about how they create an identity? What do they do?
I mean, it's not like there's a lack of issues to confront, right? I mean, you look at the education data that's come in the last couple of weeks, decades low scores in reading and math. We have an education crisis in this country. I wrote a column at the end of the summer, start of the school year, about what I think is one of the great bipartisan achievements in the last couple of years, which is state by state, red America and blue America, banning cell phones bell to bell in school. But again, that's happening at the state level. Obviously, we have profound challenges, when it comes to the fiscal solvency of the federal government, the role of the country abroad, an aging population, and neither party, Steve, you make a really good point. Neither party really has a theory of the case on what they're going to do about it. I mean, we're really in a moment where, neither party is prosecuting a coherent ideological agenda, right? The Republicans are for whatever Trump cares about, and Trump has no legislative agenda. And Trump's legislative agenda is already over, right?
Yeah.
He needed a vehicle to pass a bill that was going to extend the 2017 tax cuts and do a few sweeteners that he talked about on the campaign trail. And guess what? They did it. And like, he doesn't have any big desire to do much else. Now that you hear the business community fantasize about the idea that you could do Nixon goes to China and Trump can say, I closed down the border and now I'm going to do what Bush, Obama, and Biden couldn't do. I'm going to solve the entirety of the immigration challenge in this country by fixing the entire system. The problem there is you and I know that his staff would stop him from doing that. And the temptation would be, I think, killed pretty fast in the crib. So, from a policy standpoint, the Republicans are for, what Trump's sort of impulses, plus the high-end tax cuts that their donors crave, which they've kind of already taken care of already by keeping the 17 tax cuts in place. And Democrats are against Trump and largely against, spending cuts and issues like Medicaid. But besides that, like, I couldn't tell you what Democrats are for, besides being against Trump.
Is the answer? I mean, I hate to think about it this way. Is the answer for Democrats to be competitive to put out an entertainer, a non-ideological entertainer who can?
I don't know if it has to be an entertainer, but it's got to be somebody, Steve. What I believe is, I think Democrats need somebody that can do two things. One, somebody that can break through and hold your attention in the attention economy. Who can get you by the lapels for 7 seconds watching a video on your phone? Okay, that's number one. Number two is who could run credibly against the status quo and against both parties in Washington. If you look at the Democrats who found success for the last half century and you take Biden out of the equation, because Biden's the exception that proves the rule for the very reason that we mentioned a minute ago. Biden's a vessel against Trump and against COVID. He was not a candidate in his own right in a lot of ways. Carter, Clinton, Obama, 76, 92, 08. There's the three Democratic candidates who won the presidency, besides Joe Biden. You're going back for a half century. All three of them ran against Washington, against the status quo, and against both parties, and promised to clean up the mess in D.C., right? And each of them generationally was on the younger side. And I think, if you can do that, and if you can break through on an iPhone, I don't think you have to be an entertainer. I just think that you got to have those two skills. Now, it's not going to be a 17-point PowerPoint. It's not going to be white papers, right? It's not going to be op-eds. You just got to break through, right?
Last question on politics. You talk to Republicans these days, and there's, and this is a long ways off, of course, but there's a certain assumption that J.D. Vance is the heir apparent, that he is sort of MAGA plus, that he steps in. Obviously, Marco Rubio, very ambitious. I think we've seen that in his willingness to say the things he's had to say to be Secretary of State and to stay in Trump's good graces, making arguments I think many times he doesn't believe. So he could be somebody who would be a Republican candidate in 2028. But there's an assumption that I don't buy, that it's sort of J.D. Vance's for the taking. Is it too early to say that? Do you think he's the front runner on the Republican side? This is all assuming, by the way, that Trump doesn't try to stay for a third term.
Let me wrap up the point that I was making before, too, because I think this is important. The last two presidents couldn't be more different, Barack Obama and Donald Trump. They have one big thing in common. Both of them transcended political culture and broke into pop culture. Trump was already a celebrity in his own right. Obama became one, and they did it in ways that were bigger than American politics, right? These were not John Kerry, Mitt Romney type figures. They were bigger than politics. On the question of who's the heir apparent for Trump, I don't think Trump wants a primary, Steve. I think Trump wants to have the apprentice in the White House, and he wants to decide this. He will tell the Republican voters what the ticket's going to be, thank you very much, and he ain't going to do it a moment before he has to. He does not want to be a lame duck. He does not want to have to see these guys tromp around Iowa and New Hampshire litigating his record. He wants to decide. So I just think he's going to find a way to do that. The voters, I think, will still be fine with it because he controls the base, and that's certainly the primary electorate. Today, I think it's Vance Who knows? We're sitting here in the fall of 2025. That's ages away from now. And I think it's too early to say. People with Trump tend to have challenges. I don't think we're overstating the case to say, the nature of his relationships can be tempestuous, right? So we'll see where Vance and Rubio are by 27, 28. I will say this. Rubio clearly has real talent on the stump. He's a charismatic figure. He goes to Charlie Kirk's memorial service and he talks about Christianity in a way that's very accessible and very concise for a minute and a half. And that goes viral. And you have people like Franklin Graham who are posting sort of the explainer, if you will, Marco Rubio explaining Christianity at a memorial service. And I don't think he planned for that to go viral. I don't think that was Rubio's strategy. I don't think they were hatching that in Foggy Bottom. He just has those kind of chops. And so I don't know if there is any kind of a primary. Maybe he'll be formidable. Steve, I just think that Trump doesn't want a primary. He didn't want one in 24. He told Ronald Romney, don't have debates, don't have a primary. What are we doing? And that was for him. He's now in control of the party. He's the president. I just think he's going to want to dictate the terms of this in every possible way,
Well, he may want a primary because he may not want to leave. We saw that he didn't want to leave before. You now have people like Lindsey Graham actively encouraging him to stay.
That's the next podcast.
Dangerous and scary. That's the next podcast.
That's the next podcast.
We're going to let you go. Jonathan Martin.
We're going to need strong drink for that one, buddy. We're going to need strong drink for that one.
We'll go to Wisconsin and have an old-fashioned.
Or three.
Brandy old-fashioned.
Exactly.
Thank you for joining us, Jonathan. I hope you have a great dinner. Will you do us a favor and send a picture of your ribs so we can pop it in the show notes?
I will happily do that. I'm usually very shy about talking about food, taking pictures of it. I tend to be kind of almost reckless on that stuff. I sort of keep it private. But I think this one night I'll make an exception, Steve, and do that for you. So.
Well, we appreciate you coming out of your shell for us. I'm sure it was, the fact that I love food every bit as much as you do and that we spent a fair amount of our time together talking about it, that maybe teased it out of you.
All right, brother.
Thanks for joining us. Have a great meal. Enjoy the game.
Thanks, Steve. Go Tigers. Go Packers. See you, buddy.